The lawyer's fingers were steady, almost casual, as she pushed the final page toward me across her walnut desk. "Congratulations, Mr. Hargreaves," she said. "The sale of Hargreaves Metalworks is closed. $68 million. I read the number the way a man reads the label on a prescription bottle slowly. Once, twice, until it stops looking like a number and starts to feel like a verdict. 68 million. After 31 years of summers spent in a cramped garage, of nights bent over blueprints by a single lamp, of learning how to coax value out of raw metal, and a stubbornness that never quite let me quit, it had come down to these two words on a page and that tight little row of digits. It was a strange weight to carry. Not the kind that felt heavy in your hands, the briefcase full of bank forms, the envelopes of checks, but the quiet, gravitational weight of a life's work reduced to a single, shareable fact. $68 million. The irony of it sat in my throat like a coin. 18 years earlier, I'd been in a soup kitchen line in East Van, wondering how I'd scrape together bus fare for the week. My son Daniel had said something that cut cleaner than any wire brush. "You're embarrassing, Dad." He'd said it in the driveway of the house the bank had just taken back, while his wife waited in their BMW. And the words had landed like a verdict that time, too. I folded the paper along the banker's pen line and slipped it into my jacket. Outside, the October wind had that brittle edge of winter bite to it. I almost missed the vibration of my phone until it stopped and started again in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. "Dad." The voice on the other end was older, but unmistakably his Daniel. 18 years had a way of tracing new lines around a voice, but the shape of it was what I'd carried with me through 1,000 nights. "It's Daniel. I need to talk. It's important." For 18 years, I had rehearsed how that conversation might go. Sometimes I pictured him ashamed on my doorstep. Sometimes I pictured confrontation, a breaking of things that were never going to be fixed. I had tucked away fantasies, some vengeful, some forgiving like maps you never intend to read. Part of me wanted to hang up on the stranger who'd hurt me in my own memory and move on with the clean, steady life I'd built. Part of me wanted to listen until he gave me the apology that would have healed a wound I'd learned to live with. "Where are you?" I asked. "Toronto," he said after a beat. "I'm at the Carlton. Can you come? Please. I don't have anyone else." The Carlton. One of those hotels where the bellmen look like they've rehearsed humility and the chandeliers know the names of everyone who's ever stayed. If a man is in real trouble and holed himself up there, I thought his kind of trouble usually doesn't run on loose change. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. I didn't tell him I'd be thinking of every year he'd been absent on the taxi ride in. I didn't tell him how many nights I lay awake counting the small mercies that kept me from giving in two good tools, a like-minded customer, the ache of the next project. I walked to the address with my hands in my coat pockets, letting the November sky clear my head. 18 years. I had been 52 when Daniel shut the door on me. I lost my job as a shift foreman at an auto plant when the company folded in that long winter of layoffs. 24 years of the same floor, a steady paycheck, and a lot of small, honest pride gone in a single phone call. My wife had passed 2 years before that, and medical bills had been the first fissure our family couldn't bridge. The mortgage slipped, the bank called, and I found myself moving into a basement room in the east side with nothing but a duffel in my toolbox. Daniel came by once that summer. He saw the basement, the thrift store furniture, the box of my books. He looked at me the way people look at a photograph that's been spoiled by water, familiar, yes, but not whole. He said what the marriage and the expectations and a son's desire to be acceptable all bent toward. We can't be associated with that. I can still taste the day in my mouth sometimes, like a pill I swallowed and couldn't dissolve. The hotel's lobby smelled like lemon and promise. The clerk typed my name and then handed me a small card with a room number. I rode the elevator up and rehearsed a straight, level voice. "You can plan what you'll say until you forget you wrote it." I told myself that whatever happened on the other side of that door, I would keep my feet planted. 18 years had taught me how to bend without breaking, but it had also taught me how to stand. I knocked. The door opened, and there he was, thinner than the man who'd once taught me to sand a weld seam, his hair threaded with gray. The room smelled faintly of cologne and the kind of loneliness that expensive curtains buy you. Dad, he said, and the single word was all the invitation or accusation he needed. For a long moment, we just stood there, father and son, separated by a doorway and nearly 2 decades of silence. Daniel's eyes flicked over me, searching for something familiar, and I could see his chest tighten when he found it. The same blue eyes, the same stubbornness around the mouth. But I wasn't the man he'd left behind, and he wasn't the boy I used to guide through half-finished projects in the garage. He stepped aside. "Come in, Dad." The suite was neat, too neat, the kind of order that feels like someone's afraid to make a mess. Two untouched coffee cups sat on the table beside a laptop and a pile of papers. I took a seat on the sofa, and the silence between us felt like static building in the room. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Daniel said, pacing near the window. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "After 18 years, people usually mean it when they stay gone." He swallowed hard, then dropped into the armchair across from me. "You have every right to hate me," he said. "I said things back then that I can't take back. I was angry, scared. I blamed you for losing everything. And did it help?" I asked quietly. "Did pushing me away make it easier?" His face twitched. "No," he whispered. "It made everything worse." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his forehead. "Dad, I didn't call you for forgiveness, though I hope one day you can give it. I called because I need help. Real help." That word landed with a weight I wasn't ready for. Help. The same word he'd refused to hear from me when the bank came for the house. The same word I'd prayed he'd one day remember. I studied him for a long second. His suit looked expensive, but the buttons were mismatched. His tie was loose, and his wedding ring still there was scuffed, like it had been twisted too often. "What kind of help?" I asked. He hesitated, then turned the laptop toward me. A series of numbers and charts filled the screen: financial statements, company documents, loan agreements. "I run a firm now," he said. "Investment management. We had a bad quarter, then a worse one. One of our partners, he disappeared with client funds. Millions, Dad. And now the auditors are circling. If they find out I signed off on those papers, I could lose everything. My house, my name, even go to jail." I sat back, letting the words settle. My son, who once sneered at me for being broke, was now afraid of losing his wealth the same way I had. The irony didn't feel sweet, it felt tired. "Why me?" I asked. "You've got lawyers, investors, people who probably know how to clean this up." "Because none of them trust me anymore," he said, voice breaking. "And I can't trust them either. You're the only person I know who ever built something honest." I thought maybe you could help me figure out what to do. For a second, I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the universe has a cruel sense of rhythm. I had dreamed for years of hearing him say those words, not about money, but about trust. And here it was, tangled in desperation. "I can't fix your books, Daniel," I said slowly. "But I can help you see what's broken." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I deserve that." We sat in silence again, the hum of the city bleeding in through the windows. I could see the weight in his posture, the same exhaustion I'd carried when the bank repossessed our home. He looked smaller now, not in stature, but in spirit. "Tell me everything," I said, "from the start. No lies, no shortcuts." He took a shaky breath and began to speak. As the words poured out, I realized this wasn't about the missing millions. It was about a man who'd spent his whole life chasing the kind of success that made him forget what it cost to be decent. And maybe, just maybe, this was the moment we both had been crawling toward different paths. Same lesson. Daniel's story came out in bursts, like a leaking pipe, first a few drips, then a flood he couldn't stop. "It started small," he said. "We had this investor, a construction magnate from Dubai. He wanted fast returns, but the market was slow. So my partner, Ellis, suggested we reallocate a portion of client funds temporarily. Said we'd replace it before the audits. I didn't like it, but the board was pushing for growth, and I wanted to prove I wasn't a failure like." He caught himself too late. Like me, I finished for him. He didn't answer, just stared at the floor. "I told myself it was just business," he continued. Then Ellis disappeared, vanished with everything. 42 million gone overnight. The investors are furious. The regulators are sniffing around. They'll look at my signature on those approvals and assume I was in on it. He ran his hands through his hair. I'll mortgage my house to try and cover the gap. But it's not enough. If this goes public, I'll lose my license, my reputation, everything. I studied him. The expensive watch, the trembling fingers, the hollow look in his eyes. He'd spent half his life running from poverty, only to end up enslaved by money. What are you asking me to do? I said. I need a way out, he said quietly. A clean way. You've always been resourceful. You built something from nothing. I thought maybe you could help me rebuild before it all collapses. For a long time, I said nothing. The irony wasn't lost on either of us in begging for help from the man he once abandoned in the dirt. But under the pride and the pain, I saw something else in him. The boy who used to follow me into the workshop, asking questions about torque and steel, who once said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to make something that lasts." That boy wasn't gone. He was buried. "I'll help you," I said finally. "But not the way you think." He looked up hopeful. "You will." "Yes, but not to hide what happened. You have to face it." He blinked. "Face it? Dad, if I do that, I'll lose everything." "You already have," I said softly. "You just don't know it yet." He frowned, confusion giving way to anger. "You don't understand how the world works anymore. It's not about morals, it's about survival. If I come clean, they'll destroy me. And if you lie, you'll destroy yourself," I replied. He stood, pacing the room, running both hands through his hair. "Easy for you to say. You've got nothing to lose." I felt that one land deep, but I didn't flinch. "You're wrong," I said. "I lost everything once already, your mother, our home, you, and I rebuilt. You can't build anything worth keeping on top of deceit." He turned to me, tears shining in his eyes. "What would you do if you were me?" I looked out the window. The city below was a mosaic of lights, some steady, some flickering out. "I'd tell the truth," I said, "even if it broke me. Because the kind of peace that comes from honesty is the only kind that lasts." He slumped back into the chair, silent. "Daniel," I said quietly, "when your mother was dying, she told me something I never forgot. She said, 'Integrity isn't a decoration, it's a backbone.' You lost yours trying to keep up with men who never had one to begin with." He rubbed his eyes, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think there's still a way to make this right?" "There's always a way," I said. "But it starts with owning your part of the mess. No lawyers, no excuses, just the truth." He nodded slowly, his shoulders trembling. "I'm scared." "So was I," I admitted, "every day after you left. But fear's not the enemy, it's the compass. It tells you where the fight is." For the first time that night, I saw the hardness in his face begin to crack. He wasn't the arrogant executive anymore. He was just a man my son lost and trying to find his way back. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Good," I replied, rising from my seat. "That's more than most people ever do." As I headed for the door, he called after me. "Dad, thank you for coming." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "You don't have to thank me, son. Just prove to yourself that you're better than the choices that brought you here." Then I left, carrying both a strange heaviness and the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years' hope. 2 days passed before I heard from Daniel again. I spent them walking along the harbor, watching the ferries come and go, thinking about how men measure their lives in wealth, in years, in losses, or in what they finally learn too late. On the third morning, just as I was finishing my coffee, my phone buzzed. "Dad," he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of that polished confidence he used to wear like armor. "I did it." "You did what?" "I called the board. I told them everything. About Ellis, the funds, my signature. I told them I'd cooperate with the authorities if it came to that." For a long moment, I didn't say a word. I just let the sound of his confession hang in the air. When I finally spoke, I kept my voice steady. "That's brave, son." He gave a hollow laugh. "Brave? Maybe stupid. They've frozen the company accounts. My partners are furious. I'll probably lose my position by next week." "Maybe," I said, "but you've gained something worth more than any title." He exhaled shakily. "I don't know if I believe that yet." "You will," I said. "Give it time." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Can we meet again? Just to talk. No business this time." "Of course." We met that evening at a small diner on Dundas Street, the kind of place where the waitresses call everyone Han and the coffee tastes the same year after year. Daniel arrived looking lighter, as if confession had peeled something off his shoulders. He sat across from me, his tie gone, sleeves rolled up. I thought it would destroy me, he said. But after I told him the truth, I actually slept for the first time in months. That's what happens when you stop carrying the world on your conscience, I said, stirring my tea. He smiled faintly. You were right. About everything. I spent years trying to prove I was better than you, richer, smarter, stronger. And all it got me was fear. I forgot what you taught me in the garage. That work means nothing if your word doesn't back it. I looked at him for a long moment. His eyes had changed. They weren't the same restless, hungry eyes that used to dart toward every opportunity. They were calmer, grounded. I saw the boy he once was and the man he was trying to become. What happens now? I asked. I'll step down from the firm, he said. Face the investigation. Maybe they'll find me, maybe worse. But at least I won't have to live looking over my shoulder. I nodded. That's a start. He hesitated, then added, there's something else. The investors might still recover most of the money through insurance and assets. But I want to pay back my part personally. Every cent I signed for. It'll take years, but I owe it. I smiled faintly. That's the man your mother wanted you to be. At the mention of her, his eyes grew wet. I still remember her singing while she cooked. She used to hum that old tune, what was it? Blue Skies, I said softly. She sang it every Sunday. He nodded, his lips trembling. I wish she could see this. She can, I said, just not the way you think. When the check came, he tried to pay, but I stopped him. Let me, I said. You've paid enough for one lifetime. Outside, the night was soft, the kind of early winter calm that makes every street lamp look like it's wrapped in memory. We stood by the curb in silence until he said, Dad, I don't know how to make it up to you. You already have, I said, by remembering who you are. He nodded, eyes glistening, then pulled me into an awkward, uncertain hug, the kind that starts hesitant and ends with real weight. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I held my son again. Not the man he pretended to be, but the one I'd always hoped he could become. When he stepped back, I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a boy, a quiet kind of peace. As I watched him walk away toward his car, a thought came to me, simple and sharp. Life gives you 2 kinds of wealth, money and meaning. Lose one, and you might still rebuild. Lose the other, and you'll spend forever looking for yourself in the ruins. Daniel had finally chosen the right one. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt like I hadn't lost him at all. Months passed after that night. The city thawed from winter into spring, and the world began to look alive again, bare branches waking, puddles shrinking into sidewalks, faces softening under the first warmth of April. I kept busy, visiting the old workshop, now converted into a community repair shed. Retirement had given me time, but it was the small acts, fixing a neighbor's kettle, teaching a young apprentice how to hold a wrench steady, that made the hours meaningful. Every so often, Dana would call. Not out of panic anymore, but out of habit, short, human calls, the kind that start with "How are you?" instead of "I need something." Sometimes he'd ask about a recipe his mother used to make. Sometimes he'd just talk about his son, Caleb, who was turning 8 and had taken to drawing rocket ships on every scrap of paper he could find. One afternoon, I heard the knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there holding a small wooden box. His suit was gone. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, no pretension left. I thought I'd visit, he said. No crisis this time. Good, I said with a grin. Come in before I charge you rent for standing in the hall. He laughed and stepped inside, placing the box on the table. I made this, he said. Started working with what again helps me think. The box was simple but beautiful, the grain polished to a warm sheen. I ran my fingers along the lid. You remembered what I taught you. I remembered everything, he said quietly, especially what I forgot to appreciate. We sat together for hours, talking not about the past anymore, but about things that might still come. He told me about his new job, a modest position at a smaller firm doing ethical investment audits. It's not glamorous, he said, but it feels honest. That's more than most people can say about their work, I replied. He hesitated, then added, the inquiry cleared last month. They found no evidence I benefited from the missing funds. I'm free, Dad. The way he said free told me everything. It wasn't just about the legal outcome. It was about something far deeper. That's good news, I said. He nodded. I wanted to tell you in person. And there's something else. He reached in the box and took out an envelope. It's for you. I opened it slowly. Inside was a check not for millions, but a sum large enough to startle me nonetheless. I can't take this, I said immediately. You have to, he said. It's not a gift. It's gratitude. You spent your life building something from nothing, and I spent mine breaking what you built. I want to give back, even a little. I looked at him, this man who had once walked away from me in a driveway without a backward glance. Now here he was, eyes steady, heart open. I don't need your money, Daniel, I said softly, but I'll take your time. That's the one thing we both ran out of once. He smiled, slipping the check back into the box. Then I'll start paying in hours instead. The weeks that followed became the kind of days I'd stopped believing I'd ever have again. Sunday dinners with Caleb asking me to tell stories about the old days, Daniel showing up early to help with groceries, laughter replacing all those years of unspoken apologies. One evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I stood by the window watching the city lights blink on like tiny promises. My reflection stared back older, lined but content. Life doesn't always hand you closure in neat packages. Sometimes it gives you second chances wrapped in ordinary moments. A knock on the door, a call you weren't expecting, a dinner that ends in shared silence instead of anger. Daniel found redemption not by erasing the past, but by confronting it. And maybe that was the real inheritance he'd received, not the factory, not the money, not even my approval, but the understanding that integrity is the only legacy that survives time. I thought about the day I signed those sale papers, $68 million, a number that once felt like victory. But sitting there that night, I realized something strange. I would have traded every cent for the peace I had now. When I closed the curtains, the words of my late wife echoed again in my mind, soft, steady, as if carried by the hum of the city outside. Integrity isn't a decoration, it's a backbone. For years, I thought she meant that for me. Now, I understood she meant it for us. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, my phone buzzed with a new message. Daniel, hey Dad, Caleb says goodnight. He wants to visit the workshop this weekend. Says he wants to learn how to make something that lasts. I smiled, typing back slowly. Tell him I'll keep the tools ready. And for the first time in decades, I fell asleep knowing that the family I thought I'd lost had been rebuilt not through wealth or revenge or luck, but through the quiet, stubborn work of forgiveness. Because sometimes the richest men aren't the ones who make millions. They're the ones who finally learn what's worth keeping. Summer came quietly that year. The kind of summer that didn't rush in with heat or noise, but with long, golden evenings and the slow hum of cicadas. The city softened, and so did I. The workshop, once filled with the smell of oil and metal, now carried the faint scent of wood shavings and varnish. Where heavy machines once stood, there were benches lined with tools Daniel and Caleb used on weekends. The sound of hammering, the scrape of sandpaper, and a child's laughter had replaced the echo of industry. Caleb called it Grandpa's Factory of Fixing. He made a hand-painted sign for the door, crooked letters, bright blue, sealed with a thumbprint at the bottom. Every time I looked at it, I couldn't help but smile. On Sundays, Daniel and I would sit by the open door, watching the boy at work. Sometimes he'd build small wooden cars, other times just hammer nails into old blocks for fun. He'd ask endless questions. Grandpa, did Dad used to fix things too? Not at first, I'd say with a grin. But he's learning now. Caleb would look up with a proud smile, and Daniel would roll his eyes. You make it sound like I was hopeless. I'd tease, and the three of us would laugh. The kind of laugh that comes when the past has finally loosened its grip. That autumn, Daniel asked me to join him at an award ceremony. His firm was being recognized for its work in corporate transparency. I hesitated at first. Crowds never suited me, but he insisted. You taught me everything I needed to know about honesty, he said. You should be there. So I went. The hall was grand, chandeliers glittering, the kind of place where people clapped politely and sipped water from tall glasses. When they called Daniel's name, he walked to the stage, not the polished, arrogant man he once was, but someone grounded, someone whole. When he took the microphone, he paused for a moment. Then, instead of talking about numbers or profits, he began with a story. When I was young, he said, my father built a company from his own two hands. He taught me that integrity isn't about what you earn, it's about what you build that doesn't fall apart. I forgot that once, but he didn't. And because he didn't, I found my way back. He looked straight at me then, eyes bright under the stage lights. This award belongs to him. The room applauded, but I barely heard it. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from something deeper, something like pride, the kind I thought I'd buried years ago. After the ceremony, he came to me quietly, slipping the trophy into my hand. You keep it, he said. I already have what matters. I didn't argue. For once, there was nothing left to fix. Now, on quiet nights, I sometimes sit alone in that workshop. The tools hang in their places, the wood dust glows gold under the lamp, and the hum of the city fades into the background. I think about the years, how they took so much and still gave back something better. The factory, the money, the mistakes, they all feel small now. Pieces of a larger design I was too close to see back then. And if you ask me what I've learned after all this time, I'd tell you simply, forgiveness is not weakness. It's the courage to rebuild without the promise of being repaid. The door creaks open, and Caleb's small voice cuts through the quiet. Grandpa, can we build something before dinner? I turn, smiling. Sure. What do you want to make? He grins. Something that lasts. And as the evening light fills the room, I realize we already have.